one and all, and welcome back to another thrilling episode of Off the Dome. I'm your humble interviewer, Jordan Brown, and with me for the very first time is our passionate head of production. Say hi, passionate head of production.
Hi, passionate head of production. You don't know I'm passionate. You make assumptions that I'm passionate.
You've been at Dropout long enough that if you're not, like, what on earth is happening? You've had too many promotions at Dropout to not be passionate about the work.
I'm pretty passionate. I'm very passionate. So
yes,
you got
Kyle.
me.
Thank you.
You're right.
Thank you so much for joining me. This is so exciting. Obviously, very exciting time for Dropout, as I mean most times are. But like we're in the midst of obviously coming up on the end of Very Important People season 1. Obviously, season 2 is in the works. Game Changers in the midst of maybe the best season ever. Who knows? Certainly up like 5 instantly iconic episodes. In like right out the gate. But my most important question: who's more immature, the literal children on Reading Rainbow or Grant O'Brien?
I mean, Grant O'Brien, obviously.
Okay.
Those children eventually grow up. Grant is, he is truly one of the most enjoyable humans to work with. The energy that he brings to any set all the time is not only limitless, but it's committed. He knows who he is, and he's ready to bring it at all times. So, it's one of these things where he's just a joy to work with. So love his Grant.
Look, yes, agreed 1,000,000%. Grant is fantastic. I am, though, super curious how you went from this trajectory of seemingly producing children's television into
pivot to comedy. Comedy.
A very, adult in the like language sense, obviously not like yes.
I know. Whenever I tell people that journey, they go, "So let me get this straight. You went from iconic LeVar Burton to Grant giving 52 blowjobs and listen, the facts look, it's all storytelling, okay? It's one of the journeys that I am most proud of. It was a classic story of it's all about who you know. Reading Rainbow was my very first production job right out of college. And, I will say that LeVar Burton is truly one of the kindest, most sincere humans that you will ever meet. He is exactly the person that you would hope and expect him to be from growing up on a show like Reading Rainbow. And I started there as an assistant and had this quid pro quo with him in my early 20s that was, hey, I want to be a producer. This is what I want to do. I love producing. I want to do it. And I'd love an opportunity. So if that opportunity ever comes around, please look my direction. And sure enough, I'll never forget, it was 2010. They were going to Suriname, which is a really beautiful country in South America. And they needed someone to basically just put some segments together. And he handed it over to me. I was still working from as an assistant at the time, and thus began a 6-year career producing content for Reading Rainbow in the field. And the thing that even though like children's content and certainly uncensored adult level comedy don't always have a lot in that, the overlap of the Venn diagram. But what it did for me was make me realize that I love what we would call kind of unscripted content, right? Now, we can go into how a lot of what we do at Dropout is actually scripted or is a hybrid of unscripted and scripted. But the idea that it's not coming from a screenplay and you are capturing content that happens in that moment, that was a passion that was instilled in me through the 6 years I was on Reading Rainbow. Had the privilege of traveling all over the world, doing really cool things, and as do lots of jobs and shows and companies. That time kind of ran its course. There was some leadership changes. The company itself was going through some things, and that was really my opportunity to kind of try something else, work on new things. And so I spent a period of time after Reading Rainbow freelance. And what, you know, if you've had the pleasure of being freelance, Jordan, but it
I
is,
have.
it's a hustle, it's a grind, right? And you have to constantly be thinking about not just the productions that you're working on right now, but also what's coming up. And I had a old colleague of mine that had worked for me as my production manager at Reading Rainbow. She was working for, at the time, College Humor. And as I'm sure you and a lot of your followers know the story, that at that time College Humor was a big, you know, kind of corporate type company, and they were still producing sketches for YouTube. And so she said, "Hey, would you want to come produce a sketch or two?" Sure, sounds like fun. I grew up watching a lot of College Humor stuff, and sound like a good deal. And at that time, when you're freelance, anything is good. Any money is good money. And so did a couple sketches for them, while I was also at the time doing documentaries, and I was doing political ads, and I was doing stuff for nonprofits. So, I mean, you name it, I was probably working on something in that kind of genre. And you know, one thing led to another. I did 4 sketches for them, and then was given the opportunity to produce season 3 of Actually. And then I'll never forget, Actually went very well. We had a really good time. As a producer, that was great because I'm a contract worker. The amount of work you get when you're doing more of a television show is certainly a lot more than a sketch. The time we were doing sketches, literally I was on for 5 days. You got 3 days of prep. We would shoot 2 sketches in one day, and that would usually be a Thursday, and then I'd wrap out on Friday, and that was the whole job. Whereas a show like Actually, I was working for weeks, and it was great. So it goes well. I do another season of Actually there. I think that was season 4. And then they come to me, this is late 2019, we're almost at 5 years at this
Mhm.
point, and they go, "Hey, our chief creative officer, this guy named Sam, probably never met him before," which I hadn't at that point. He has this idea for a show that he really wants to get done, and we really want to get it done soon. So you can either take that kind of sight unseen, you don't know what it is. The most creative that they had at the moment was a Google Doc, or you can take, I think it was either season 2 or season 3 of Paranoia, which was another show that had, you know, been on the Dropout platform already. And they gave me the choice, and I was like, I'm always up for an adventure. Let's go with the Google Doc show by Sam. And lo and behold, that was Game Changer. And so I then produced season 1 of Game Changer, and that was such a treat and such a joy. And truly, at this point now, 5 years ago, since that very first season. And then kind of the third chapter to that transition was, of course, both the pandemic and College Humor, you know, being sold from IAC. And in 2020, I was sure I was never going to hear from them ever again. You know, you're freelance. They're not, they don't
Yeah.
fire you. You just like, hey, it was great working with you. And now that's it, the end, and goodbye. Thank you for your time. So I was working on at that time, it was 2020. I was doing a lot of political ads, and I got a call from David Kearns, and he goes, "Hey man, we're still around. There's like 6 of us, and we want to do some hybrid content using Riverside and Skype. We want to do a remote season of Actually, and we want to do a remote season of Game Changer. Would you want to come do those essentially from your living room?" And yeah, absolutely, of course. I mean, truly, and even at that time, even in the College Humor days, working for that group was such a pleasure compared to what I know are a lot of experiences on set in the entertainment industry. They
Mhm.
already had the culture started, and so that was a very quick yes. So I spent the latter part of 2020 doing remote seasons for them, and then in 2021, the town had gotten the return to work agreement settled with the unions, and people figured out that we could now, you know, get back into to doing this in person one way or another. And so they invited me to a new space that they had gotten, and I did a season of Breaking News. I did a very hot season of Game Changer, And it was right after that I got the call from Dropout saying, "Hey, we're going to just keep on doing this, and now we've got 10 people at the company, and we're looking at maybe doing some new shows. We need someone to run all of the shows and run all the productions. Are you interested?" And Jordan, after 3 or 4 years of freelance, you're like, that was a good time. I'm ready. I'm ready to move on to something, with a studio at this point. And so that was it. And that'll be, am I right, about 2.5 years? So 3 years ago, November. And
Yeah.
what a joy, right? At the time, we only had Game Changer, Actually, Breaking News, Dimension 20.
Yeah.
And that was only 2.5 years ago. And now I'm about 17 shows if you include what's in development right now.
And selling out Madison Square Garden, no big deal. Just like
No big deal.
a small difference a few years makes, right? Like
Just a small difference a few years makes.
A 5-year gap of our company has been dismantled to we've sold out Madison Square Garden.
Isn't it nuts?
Wild trajectory.
The messages I've gotten from being like, so wait, let me understand. Did you sell out? Or is this like a pre-sale? I'm like, no, it's sold out in like 2 days, 3 days, right? Clearly not without complication. My goodness. But to see that growth pattern, right? And the number of shows that we've got certainly out on the platform now and what's coming down the pike in production. I have recently in the last year also really kind of taken the reins of a lot of our development pipeline, like how we're transitioning ideas and pitches and internally generated ideas into actual shows that we want to do. And I can tell you that list is getting longer by the week. And what a treat to be in a position where you can go, should we do this or this? Which great idea do we want to do? Rather than feel like you are barely able to get 3 or 4 shows off the ground, right?
Yeah.
And staff-wise, we're now, I think when we come back from this hiatus, we'll be welcoming on a couple new members, which should take us into the mid to high 20s, which, that's for us, that's a big deal. I think a lot of people are like, Dropout, you're a studio, you're doing really well, you must be huge, there's people everywhere. We're a very small company,
right? With a lot of contractors.
And boy, are we grateful for all of them, because I think we did an assessment at the end of this last year. We were fortunate enough to be able to do, bonuses, like crew bonuses at the end of the year. And we had to look at how many people we had on our payroll at some point. Even if it was for a day, you were still included in that effort. And I want to say the number was near 300, just in last year alone, which is very sizable and a critical part of what we do.
Yeah. And I talked to Kevin Stiller, and he had said, I hired someone to do 6 hours of shooting one day, and that person got the email of like, hey, we're doing profit sharing this year. Congrats. Like just wildly great. I will also say, fantastic news that LeVar Burton is kind. My wife has a huge crush on LeVar Burton, a thing I didn't know until several years into our marriage. And we were playing like a card game at at a friend's birthday party, and it wasn't like a who would you rather kind of thing, but it was just like a who's more attractive kind of game. And I don't remember who it was between, but the zero hesitation of which my wife said LeVar Burton shocked me, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that about you. We learn new things all the time. So she will be
a good-looking dude, and as he ages, he gets better looking. I don't know if you've seen recently. He's got the beard. He's got the. I mean, he's a good-looking dude. He's earned every bit of the respect, And when you think about celebrity in this town, it's so easy to make a mistake. It's so easy to do something wrong, do something flippant, get caught, making a mistake you didn't intend, and all of a sudden you're under fire. But when you look at his track record from Roots to Reading Rainbow to Star Trek, a lot of people don't know he's a director. He's out there directing NCIS. He's one of the during the Star Trek days, he was one of the cast members that had the most number of episodes under his belt. really has just somehow managed to get through this town doing all of it right. And you know, I look up to him for it. It's a
Yeah.
really impressive feat. I will say, anyone, including myself, we were doing an episode in New York once with a theater company, a bunch of young 20 somethings who were all grew up on Reading Rainbow like a lot of us did, and LeVar had something scripted to say to camera, and I don't remember which swear word he used, but he's a human and swore at a mistake or whatever it was, and the dread and fear and loss of childhood innocence on the face of this theater group was the most real awakening I've ever seen in my whole life. And it's just a reminder that, like, yeah, he's a person too.
Hmm. Yeah, I've seen him at a convention tell some tawdry stories from not even that like he participated, but like the like
Yeah,
Geordie LaForge kind of stories of like, and then you know like those like delightful.
yeah,
One of the things that's really cool about where you're at with Dropout, and I won't try to get like a lot of specifics out of you, but obviously Gastronauts was a thing that was around in 2019 as at
yeah.
least an idea, and now I can say like I know it's coming back because Sam told me like Gastronauts is one of the name of the
Well, if
shows that
Sam
you're working
said,
on. Yeah, Sam said listed that show, so I won't guess that the food set that has a space themed logo to it is Gastronauts. But what is that sort of process like of like getting to like revive some of these like lost ideas or ideas that probably I mean, theoretically, I'm assuming would have come to fruition had January 2020 not happened, and then obviously March 2020 as well. But like,
yeah, you know what's interesting is Gastronauts, even though it was an idea that's been around for more than 5 years now, that show in what we ultimately shot is not anything like what the original intent of the show was. In fact, they had actually shot some test footage before I was even there that over the last few years we've gone back to a couple of times now. Our poor director of technology had to keep bringing this footage out of our servers. They, you know, we basically bury it and then had to bring it all back and restore all that footage. But we went back a couple of times to look at it. We had some editors work on it about 2 years ago, and you know, try to figure out what we could do with it. And the general consensus was, this is not really what something that we're really excited about doing right now. And it was just a matter of you know, a creative collaboration of some folks, particularly Sam, and we also Paul. I don't know if have you spoken to Paul Robolina yet.
I have
He's
not. We have a tentative plan when Smarty Pants is coming out, since that's I believe he's showrunner on that.
perfect. Yeah, Paul is one of the most creative minds I've met in my Dropout days. Really a really strong ideas person, and so he was a part of that process, and finally came up with you know, this idea that was not the original plan for Gastronauts. And as we were going through the naming process of the show, it was really interesting because we could have come up with all kinds of new things, because this really was, when you compare the two, a new concept. This was a new show, not what they had done in the past. And but Gastronauts is such a good name. It's just such a good name that we stuck with it. So you know, all to say that that process was something that was just, and I think this is true of a lot of ideas, is that you have an idea and it's not quite right yet. It needs time for growth. It needs new voices. It needs new perspectives. It needs more discussion. Sometimes it needs some test footage. Sometimes it needs a pilot. You know, there is no blueprint for show development. It's all done differently. Sometimes people come to you with a pitch and a deck that is basically ready to shoot, and you're like, that idea is brilliant, let's do it. And other times we'll be in a meeting, and Sam will go, you know, I was at dinner the other night and had this idea, and it's nothing, but then you go, that is a great idea. How do you turn that into a show? Gastronauts was one of these stories that just lingered as an idea for a long time, to the point of having actually shot some footage. You know, I don't want to say anything's unsuccessful, but it just wasn't the right show for us. And then with the right creative discussion, you circle back on it and go, great. And something that we do is in this development pipeline, we have a lot of ideas that we'll discuss and talk about and internally decide that maybe it's not right for us right now, but we don't want to get rid of the idea, right? So we keep it, in like a like a development purgatory where it sits there and it's in front of us, the show concept and titles in front of us, and it forces us every so often to go back and go, hey, remember that idea we had 6 months ago? Is there any merit in discussing now? And sometimes it's no, like we don't need to talk about that right now. Or sometimes it's a practical thing. Sometimes it's that's a good idea, but we could only do that with a $5 million an episode budget, which we don't have right now, Jordan. Maybe in a couple of years. But you go, there's good ideas that maybe don't fit the pragmatic sense. There's good ideas that don't fit your creative direction. Sometimes there's ideas that maybe just aren't good yet, but they have the potential of being there. And I think Gastronauts kind of fell somewhere in that neighborhood. But boy, when we kicked it off, did it go? It's I'm all I'll say about Gastronauts, and I don't know if you talked to Sam before or after we shot, but
So far before.
okay. What I will say is there is a feeling that you get when you shoot any show that you're of pride, that you took something that was an idea, you put it together along with dozens and sometimes hundreds of other people, and that happens on every show. Every show has that, and along with exhaustion and stress and anxiety. But those are different. Those are just come with the job. And then every so often, you are sitting back, and as a producer, I have the luxury of being able to sit back a lot, because a lot of a production and producing job is in advance. It's a lot of the prep work and building the show. So I have the luxury sometimes of being on set and kind of just kicking back and watching. And every now and then you get a feeling that this show is going to do really well. And I'll tell you what, I had that feeling on Very Important People, as did a couple other folks. And I had that feeling again on Gastronauts. And I'd love to tell you it's on every show, but it's not. And that's kind of a good thing, because I think every now and then you go, this has the potential to be special. And I can't wait to see the first cut of Gastronauts. It's gonna be so good.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Yeah, I remember Sam was one of the other people that was like, Very Important People is special. Like we've made some.
Yeah.
I remember he picked that one out of like all the giant list of show names in the 5-year anniversary video. And oh boy, do I agree with them. What a show that has turned out to be.
It's so good. And
Yeah.
when you talk about growth and looking retrospectively, so much of Dropout was built on being a company that is parasocial, that relies on a roster of really incredible talent, but people that our subscribers and fans and followers feel like they know, and feel like they become, they understand that, like, their personalities almost through the content. And sometimes when you talk about growth, you have to think about what happens if I'm a subscriber that got referred to Dropout by a friend, but I was not part of the College Humor days, or I don't know the folks from Dimension 20. Do I understand how funny it is when there's an entire episode of Game Changer that Brennan can't win, right? Like, do I understand that fully if I haven't been a part of that parasocial vibe? Very Important People does not require any parasocial element of Dropout. Now, if you have it, if you've been around for a long time, I think as someone who's watched a lot of Dropout content, you are rewarded in that you know some of the folks on screen are like, you're in for a treat. Which I'll tell you, Brennan's episode.
Yeah. Everyone has told me that, like, the Brennan episode
might be one of the most incredible pieces of content I've had the pleasure of being a part of and watching ever, and certainly in the Dropout space. But if you're somebody who's followed Dropout, it's no surprise that Brennan shows up and brings the most talent and the most incredible talent, and that's great. But you don't.
I think one of the
have that in order to enjoy.
I think one of the the joys of like Very Important People is like Zach's episode, we got to see a very different character than what we normally get. So it's
Yes.
even like it's a parasocial, but a like change of venue. Like, of course he can do that, and I know all the like improvisers who work with him know he can do that. But for us, we see him a lot as like that joke sniper of just like waiting for the right moment and pouncing on it, not the huge over the top personality that was Tommy Shrigley. And it's like, oh, this is even more fun for me because I get to see them sort of like in a different element than what we normally do.
Yeah, and I think you get a more concentrated version of all of the talent, because a lot of times someone like Zach, who is a brilliant comedian, is surrounded by a lot of other brilliant comedians, and because he is more of that, dry delivery sniper type, it that style is more subtle. It doesn't make it lesser than, it's just a more subtle style. It's not as in your face type comedy, whereas on a show like Very Important People, he stands alone. It's him on the stage with Vic, and I know that for some comedians, that's what an opportunity to exercise parts of your comedy you don't always get to exercise, and just a different set of skills from what you would do on Dimension 20. And yeah, I mean, also one of the greatest episodes, Tommy Shrigley,
My
so
God,
good, so good.
so good. I just died. Like from like the moment the trailer dropped and like I saw Kate Elliott's like behind the scenes stills of him, and I was just like, every picture makes me more confused about how he exists as a human being. Oh my gosh, so funny.
So good, so good. Oh, I have
Yeah.
wine. I
Oh
told you. I
yes.
told
Oh
you I'd be
good. I'm
bringing
so
wine.
glad. Yes,
You forced
because
it.
you were.
I tell everybody here, if you get interviewed by Jordan, he puts in the thing wine interview. Well, now I'm just living up to the calendar title, Jordan.
Yes. Yeah. I'm very glad that you have a glass of wine because you're in the midst of a 2-week hiatus, I believe.
We are in the midst of a 2-week hiatus. We do 3 of these every year, so it's 6 weeks of dark time, and it's really done to certainly give everyone an opportune moment to appreciate family and travel and all those things. But what I really love about it, and part of its intent, is to make sure that everyone does it together. So you don't get the either the email that's like, "Hey, I know you're on vacation, but I need blank from you," right? Like in this case,
Yeah.
we're all dark. It gives us a moment to breathe and kind of reset. And for me, as I'm looking at strategy for how and when we're putting shows together, it also, I look at them as like school trimesters, right? We call them production blocks. So it's block 1, block 2, block 3. As I look at block 1, that allows me to put a certain amount of financial allocation and creative allocation, and I have a roster of producers that we work with, and making sure that everyone can jump into shows, and shows are practical in certain times of the year. It allows me to compartmentalize that in a way that I think would be a lot more difficult if we were just shooting all year round. It feels like every 4 months there is a little bit of a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then you get a chance to reset, which is really nice. So yes,
Yeah.
on our very beginning of a 2-week hiatus right now.
Yes. Which I also very much appreciate you joining me for on your hiatus.
It's really hard. Really
You
tough.
mentioned something that I am really curious about, because you mentioned sort of like series that don't go anywhere. Are there still some things like sitting around in those digital files that you're like, we're going to get to this one day? Is there like a back catalog of stuff that you're really thinking about? Or is a lot of this like coming in new, like, like the Sam, I had an idea at dinner ideas?
Yeah, it's all over the place. I would say it's majority new content, and something that we've really started to have the opportunity to explore the last, I would say, even 4 months. It's as recent as that. Is as our number of shows has grown, the number of people that we're working with outside of the like kind of insider Dropout space, the number of shows that are being pitched to us has really gone up. So, when you look at it that way too, certainly there are still a few ideas that are lingering from the old days, and that Sam knows a lot more about that than I do, because I came at the very tail end of the College Humor days, and then there was that pandemic where I was sure I'd never hear from them, and then jumped right into kind of what was year 1 of Dropout. But every now and then we'll be in a development meeting, and something will pop up from oh, we tried this a handful of years ago, or we did a pilot of this, but it didn't quite take off. Now would be a good time to try something else in that same vein. But I would say 90% of what's on the kind of ideas list, we'll call it, is either newly generated internally or is coming from an outside source, someone that we know is someone that wants to pitch us something.
Yeah. Well, while we're on the subject,
Yeah.
put Erica Abria on a travel show, send them to castles all around the world. That's my pitch for you for this week. That's just your.
And this is back to the Reading Rainbow days. I am desperate to do a travel show, and all I'll say is there are some ideas floating around. Anytime you go outside of the studio and you shoot on location, it adds certain production elements that you have to be mindful of. It adds certain cost elements. But having done Reading Rainbow, I know there's ways to mitigate that. Mm-hmm. But I personally am committed to us doing some kind of a travel show. The tough thing is that there's a lot of travel shows out there. How do you break through and make sure it's not just someone that people like going to, Europe to go explore some restaurant that no one's ever been to? Like, that's been done 100 times over. So like you said, if it's something that's really in the vein of what we do and what the people that we work with do, like Abri and Erica going to see castles, great, something like that.
And every castle in the world.
Every castle.
Find a list of
seasons and seasons worth of shows. Hey, we're building a show right here, man. But I am desperate to do a travel show. It's the most fun. I will insist that I play a role in that production for sure.
Right. Yeah. As I assume you're watching all of the very fun, like, European adventures that D20 is up to right now. Just like, I should have produced their live show.
Hey, I'm sure they're having a great time. And they're working, like I'm over here drinking wine with you, Jordan. They're
I think they are currently doing the bigger show with Brennan and Izzy as we speak. Like, I think that is currently happening.
No rest for them. They're really turning it out over there.
Yeah. Well, hey, you got to pay for that vacation somehow. Like, it was very smart to, like, we'll also do some of our improv shows. So like now Brennan and Izzy can go together. It's always so fun. Obviously, whenever a new show like kind of pops up on the Dropout radar, obviously we got the 5-year anniversary video was amazing because we got all of the list of shows that were going to be, and someone had to teach me how to go frame by frame on a YouTube video so that I could so that I could screenshot each one. Just like, and then of course just like wildly guessing what they were going to be about. I did get one right, which was Dropout Presents, but I think that one was probably everyone guessed correctly.
Yeah, there was a question about whether or not we were going to try to go with something more subtle than Dropout Presents, but we decided against it. That was something that we actually really wanted to make sure that people understood what our intent is with that project. And it's, again, another one I'm really looking forward to. That one's harder to pin because it's going to be different every episode, but it's really treating them more like specials. And that's part of our growth here is that we're trying to do new things, and that one's going to feel new and different, and I think it's going to be done in an exciting way. But yeah, when we were coming up with titles, we were like, do we need to come up with something more original or less on the nose than Dropout Presents? No, we don't. So good job. I did it.
I got one. I think I may have guessed Gastronauts right, but it's after like you were shooting and like and I'm not gonna like try to get you to confirm or deny it, so I won't give you my guess. I'm it's always, like I said, always very exciting when we get to see like new shows are coming up. When I talked to Sam, it was like 2 months ago, so it was it was either, I think it was the weekend. It was right after you had filmed that first batch, at least, of Dropout Presents, when there were like 5 shows, like, or whatever, and like over the course of the weekend. It was also very funny because when I talked to Sam, I knew what he had been wearing and that he was like standing by the door because people were just like messaging me to let me know like updates from like what was happening. But yeah,
No, go ahead.
say like it's always so exciting in those moments of like, oh, we've learned the name of a new show, Smarty Pants. Now let's everyone guess what it could be, and then like I don't know. I'm sure someone got it right because a million
It's
people
fun
guessed.
on
But
our side too, because we'll see folks talking about it in Discord or in the comments on the YouTube channel of the where we put the the 5-year anniversary video, and it's fun for us to watch people guess and participate. And I will say that I think even I mean, Reading Rainbow had a big fan base, and then obviously in freelance times, I did all kinds of stuff that were some with brands and companies that had followers and fan bases. But the fans and audience of Dropout is unique and special in a way that I think most other studios, production companies, brands, whatever you want to call us, because we're kind of all of them, would relish, to have, because the engagement and the passion and the love is really unlike anything I've ever seen. And to be able to have it, somebody that feels like a conversation. And I love to see people get so enthusiastic about what it could and couldn't be. Only obviously in the hopes that we don't ever disappoint anybody going, oh, I can't wait for blank to every now and then. It happens a lot with Dimension 20 seasons. It's people like, oh, this is totally going to be this, and we all can't wait. And I'm sitting there going, it's not that. It's not that. Or it'll be like,
it's not Percy Jackson
this season, and you're like, they're not going to be in that season. Don't get your hopes too far up. I want to chime in sometimes so much, being like, don't do it. But that's part of the fun. And at the end of the day, we have this fan base that really is so engaged in what we do, and that's unique and powerful, right? I mean, last year when we submitted for the Emmys last year, Sam tweeted with the hashtag Emmy for Game Changer, and within 20 hours it was trending number 2 on Twitter. That's amazing, right? I mean, that's like other companies would kill to have something like that, and we're fortunate that we do. So I'm so grateful that fans are out there guessing what the show titles mean, and hopefully we can continue to give hints and fun things and play with that, because it's a fun conversation that we're all having.
Yeah. As head of production, do you get to assist in picking the episode you're submitting for the Emmys this year? Because obviously it's Emmy selection time.
Yeah, so a little behind the scenes on Emmys. Obviously, there's submitting for the Emmys is either done by the studio itself, and often if you're at a bigger studio, it's done with your concert with your PR and publicity agencies, your marketing department. We don't have many of those things. We have an incredible publicist. Her name's Colleen. She's outstanding, and we love her, and she's really done an exceptional job this year. And there's going to be a lot of things coming down the pike that I'm really excited to share with everybody in the publicity world. But it's really, I mean, it's her on the publicity side. And then submitting for the Emmys was something that I had asked Sam to do probably 2 years ago. And he was obviously very supportive. Something that I find interesting is Dropout has this interesting, are we television? Are we new media? Are we digital? Are we internet content? And this is no secret. I suggest it to Sam all the time. I tell Sam we are television. This is television. When you look at the scale at which we're producing, the way in which we produce, the way in which we distribute that content, it's done in the season, format. It's done with usually 12 episodes. Sometimes it's more, sometimes a few less, but it's done in a, it's not like we have some weird like 5-episode thing all that often. The length of our content is anywhere between 20 and 40 minutes for most of these shows on average, with the exception being, Dimension 20 and Very Important People, slightly lower than that. And that's television. And the amount of work, the people that we bring onto these shows, the average day of Game Changer has about 70 people working on it. That's wild. That is television. Now, is it Stranger Things level? No, but it's still television. It's more than YouTube sketch content, right? So there's this interesting identity conversation that I think we're all kind of having in the background of certainly when it comes time for things like submitting for Emmys, but also when we're developing new shows and new content, how long do we want these shows to be, and what kinds of content do we want to be? And the really nice thing, and what I would suspect Sam would tell you, is that we actually don't have to fit into any box. Categorically, we don't have to fit into any box because we are our own platform, which really is a privilege. What excites me is that I think that we have a lot of growth opportunity to have the industry that is known as the Hollywood industry, the entertainment industry, look at Dropout as the place to for folks to get great comedy, great improv, great tabletop content, great gameplay, and great feelings all around. It's not just about laugh comedy all the time. Sometimes it's the feel good, the wholesome stuff that does really well on our platform. And
true facts about Grant Anthony O'Brien 1 and
that
2 versus 3. Like there's
versus
your divide of
yeah.
like
And
two very funny, one very
yeah,
sapient. Like
yeah, and you can have the full gamut. And I want to make sure that we obviously have the incredible fan base, which we already talked about. I want to make sure that the industry knows that we're creating this content and that it's here. And so when I say like we're television and we need to play at that level, that means putting yourself out there, like submitting for Emmys, right? So last year was the first time we did it, and because we're such a small team, Sam was like, "Yeah, you want to submit for Emmys? Go for it, Kyle. Do it." So I was like, and still am the resident in-house like Emmy project manager. If you look at it as a
okay,
project,
I'll send you the DMs about the Emmys then instead of Sam. I'll stop bothering him about the Emmys.
yeah, no, keep bothering him. Keep bothering him. It's fine. It's good. It's good. Okay. But like I had not done that in the past, and working with the Academy was a really interesting learning experience. They're great. They have a great staff over there. So I was sending off like I think every email I sent to the Academy started with, "I'm sorry, this is probably a dumb question. ... But ... And they were always like, "No, no, no, it's fine. We get this a lot. It's all good." But last year we only
I've sent so many of those emails to Colleen of like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, well, so now, fortunately, year 2, I have doubled my team, which is now it's me and Colleen. And so between the two of us, we are still like Emmy centric. And don't get me wrong, Sam, David, Andrew, they're still very involved in the decision making of what are we submitting, what do we think has the merit, what do we think might do well in the Emmys, and little things like which episodes do we put up on the Academy platform, things like that. But at the end of the day, it really is Colleen and myself just grinding it out. And we've last year we submitted Game Changer for Outstanding Game Show and Sam as Outstanding Game Show host, and it was only those two. This year we're submitting in 7 categories.
Wow.
So we're doing more than that. We also have a little bit of publicity to spend this time around. So we're going to, make sure that we're being really targeted and careful about that. But boy, I think this started with you asking about picking those episodes. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. I mean, when like you said, this season of Game Changer, every episode is just a banger. And wait till you see the ones that are still coming out.
I know.
They're so good.
And in the behind the scenes of last week's, someone referenced Siobhan being on set for an episode, which we obviously haven't seen her yet. So obviously she's coming still. And someone mentioned like, we have so many episodes where there are like multiple layers, and everyone like is watching is like, wait, we haven't seen any episodes with multiple layers. What do you mean? Yeah. So like, the more we get, I'm so excited for more.
Yeah, it's and when you set the bar like that, and then you have to pick a couple to put up to represent the show. And it's a challenge, but also what a treat, right? I mean, it's like you can't go wrong. I mean, that's a lot of the questions we ask in like an Emmys context of like, well, which one is going to do well? All of them, like they're all great. And I think that goes to show that that show in particular has grown so much, both in what we're able to do physically because of budget and crew and space, but also the way that Sam and Paul and the creative team behind the show are able to expand like what they can think is even possible is every single season just going twice as far as we did the season before. And what's funny, Sam may have told you this, right about this, so we're about to start. When we come back from this hiatus, we are going to start prep on the next season of Game Changer, and that will involve a development phase that will do a lot of brainstorming, ideation, episode generation, things like that. Very high level concepts, games, formats, and right about this time, Sam goes, "I don't know how I'm going to be able to like keep that idea generation going. We last season was so good. I don't know how we're gonna do it." And then he does.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I know it's got to be. I remember he posted something about like I don't know, they're like 2 million subscribers to Game Changer Shorts or something on YouTube. I don't know. Remember what he was like. If all of you subscribe to Dropout, we could produce Game Changer like year long. And I was like, but could you though? Like it feels like I understand you'd have the money to do that, but like how do you keep coming up with better and better shows if you're producing that many?
Yeah.
It's not like Make Some Noise where you can expand out. Just like we have a brilliant cast of improv comics. We're going to give them silly prompts. I could watch that for, every week for an entire year. It would be fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, Game Changer is so special.
Yeah, it is special. And that's what I was just going to say, which is that I think that even if we could, we wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because I think that there is kind of a, it makes it feel like an event when it comes around. Mm-hmm. Whereas if it's on every Monday all year round, I don't think you necessarily would fatigue from a show that's as great as that, but it would, I feel like, lose some of that really like this is a show. When I think of Game Changer 2, I think of the production of Game Changer is more akin to producing a live show than it is to producing a standard television show. And when you're there on the day, because since every episode is a different format and everything is different, you don't know if that day is going to involve dancers, or it's going to involve animals, or it's going to involve big set pieces, or it's going to involve extra crew members or cameos from celebrities. You have no idea, and it feels almost like running and producing like a circus or something like that. And I think that at a certain point in time, even for the audience, you want a break so you can get yourself ready for the next season,
Yeah. You also like, I don't know how much you have seen of Sam doing the hand check at the beginning of the episodes.
Yep.
And the like wild spiraling that the internet has like been like, Sam Dalton, I helped spread this pretty drastically, but like Sam Dalton has taken over for Sam Reich. This whole season is a conspiracy theory, and Sam just routinely getting online and being like, "Stop, please."
I caught up on that storyline only because of watching your videos, and I think you are to blame for that. I really think, Jordan, this one's on you. You take responsibility.
That video did.
It's not a thing. It's not a thing. Yeah. I'm sorry. It's back to like when you see people like coming up with conspiracies on Discord and things, and you're like, oh, I hope you're not disappointed. I hope you're not like the show's gonna be great, but don't be disappointed because it's not a thing,
Yeah, the swear jar's not coming back. Sam Dalton is not in control. Like, I have made follow-up videos where I'm like, hey gang, I don't think it's anything, because like I posted about it and Sam DM'd me to say it's not anything, and people are like, that's just what he would do though, and I'm like, but I don't think he would. I think he would just ignore it if it was a thing. It's so funny. God, I I understand exactly what you mean. Like of that, like you need a break in between Game Changer, especially because it does have that like such a special feel to it, and it does. I mean, Dimension 20 is probably like the flagship of Dropout, just because obviously it's got a fan base that sell out Madison Square Garden. But Game Changer feels like the jewel of Dropout, right? Of like, this is the thing that like we produce that no one else is producing anything like it. Like Dimension 20, although I think is on a different level than any other actual play. Like there are other actual plays obviously out there. Game Changer just feels so special.
Yeah, I think from that perspective of like, could another studio replicate this idea if they wanted to? And sure, could someone come up with a format where there's a game show where the game changes every show? Sure. But would it have that same quality and character that Sam brings to the camera, Sam brings to the writer's room, that our incredible team behind the scenes bring to the writer's room. Our incredible crew. I always give a hat off I did seasons 1 through 5, and then maybe 1 through 4. My coordinator at the time was this man, Justin Cyril. Justin took over the show thereafter, and a lot of times those producers are the ones that go the most unrecognized, and yet Justin has done the biggest and most recognized seasons of Game Changer to date. And I just don't think when you add all those elements together, creative, production, financial, I don't think it could be replicated as easily as maybe like, I'll Make Some Noise is a pretty straightforward format show. Game Changer really has that. There's a unique quality to it, and we've seen that it is certainly one of the anchors of Dropout, as is Dimension 20. I'll tell you what, Very Important People is not far behind in that sense either. Like the number of high profile folks that follow that Instagram account. I don't know if you've talked to Andrew Bridgman yet, but he does everything.
I have not.
He does everything at Dropout. I don't know how he just like he does it all. And but one of the things that he does is keep track of all of our accounts and making sure that like we're always aware when something interesting happens. And it feels like every day there is a new blue check somebody that dual followed the account yesterday, 2 days ago. Wild. What? That's crazy.
Right.
And that show, more than Game Changer, more than any of the other shows, has had a lot of that. And so all to say, we're Dimension 20 for sure will always be like, Dropout started with Dimension 20. Dimension 20 and actually, those were like at the very, very early days when people didn't even believe in Dropout. Those were the shows that carried it, and that fan base, is a big part of that equation, and certainly the core cast, and now all the new folks that we welcome to the table. Game Changer has become that show that's right alongside it, and I think Very Important People is going to be right up there, seasons 2 and 3. We're just starting prep on season 2 right now, and we come back. I have our producer starting, and we're talking about casting meetings. There's already some emails flying around about potential cast, potential episode ideas, and it's really exciting. Season 2.
I will say, you just said Very Important People seasons 2 and 3.
Well, I think that, look, no guarantees. I will put on the record, Jordan, for everyone, we have not greenlit season 3.
Okay.
But I think
Paula Abdul follows it. What universe is it not getting season 3?
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's good to be optimistic. And I think it's also, that's how we look at things too, is like when you look at a show and its potential longevity, it's important to look at like can you sustain season 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Actually is, I think this is, if people haven't shared this yet, it's good to know. We're about to start development and prep on season 10 of actually.
If he talked about it at PAX East, so we do know that.
Right,
like it confirmed another season, yes.
But you look at that and go, what, 10 seasons, right? In 5.5 years. Any of these shows has a potential to be able to do something like that. And so it's good to think beyond like what's right in front of you and what's kind of going to be the next thing, right? And what's your growth pattern for that show? So something certainly we're doing for Very Important People because it's already been a success.
Yeah. We're over already. Do you have a few more minutes?
No such thing. I've got more wine in my glass, so yes.
Great. Perfect. That's what I was hoping for.
Yeah.
I will say, like, one of the things, my world has been very, very weird. You know that. You follow along. You know who I am. That's very weird to me in general.
Isn't the goal for people to know who you are, Jordan?
Yeah, it is, but like it's still weird every time.
Is it?
It gets less and less weird as like it becomes more and more apparent.
Did you find yourself at PAX East being recognized? People going, "Hey, I know you."
A couple people did, yes. When I was even when I was separated from when I was with Iffy and BDG, like that obviously that was very easy for people to be like, "Hey,
sure.
The three of you, I know you're supposed to be here," but like. Yeah, I went up to like the room the day before and someone immediately was like, "Hey, would you sign my badge?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Would I sign your badge?"
You've done it. You've hit the peak. You did the thing.
Yeah.
Will you sign my badge? That's an honor.
Yeah, it was very and they were like, I had Sethi sign my badge, and I was like, she and I are not on the same level. What's happening? Um, it was very funny walking around with BDG at PAX East because my God, is he a superstar at a video game convention? Like
Absolutely.
he was in full mask, not a hesitation from people coming up and being like, "Hey, I love your work." Like people weren't coming up and be like, "Are you BDG?" Like they were coming up and just like being like, "I'm such a big fan." Like no hesitation from folks.
The range on someone like Brian David Gilbert is so impressive to me. He is in so many different facts, like parts of our content, and the skill sets required for him to be in all these different shows is wild. He also writes, as you know, he also writes actually. And to be behind the camera in that creative sense, and then be on camera in a creative sense, to be in a host position, to be out there, doing all the fun experiments and things that we do on shows, like he's really, really got it all. And like a lot of the folks we work with, the nicest guy, just the nicest guy.
Yeah, so kind. We did. I've talked to him and Iffy now, obviously, like in an hour long like this, not just like at PAX East.
Yeah.
Obviously, we talked at PAX East. Yeah, one of the things that sort of like a weird thing that's happened to me is like I now like co-host a podcast called the Dropout Drop In, where we like talk about like the week that Dropout just had or the week coming up or whatever. And a thing that my co-host and I talk about a lot is the talent incubation that is Dropout. And like obviously like you talked about like the parasocial nature of like we get to know all these people across all these different like shows, but what we keep seeing is you bring in more people in like Dirty Laundry, like that's where BDG enters the equation for like the first time proper at Dropout, and then like starts to spread out to other shows. Just like how much of that thought goes in of like, all right, we've got these brilliant like comedians, how do we get them on like we get them in on Smarty Pants, and now we can transition them to Game Changer or actually or wherever, like they start moving pieces around.
It's very much a factor in how we cast shows. Is that element, which is how do we make sure that people we know are talented, and we want to make sure our fan base gets an opportunity to see their talents. We want to make sure that we're putting them in the right places and right positions, and then giving them exposure at the right times, knowing when certain content will release. So, and we've found that while a lot of these shows, the primary purpose is to be great, funny, entertaining shows, a lot of them as kind of secondary, sometimes even tertiary, objectives is that they become vehicles for talent. So certainly the one that we reference a lot internally is Make Some Noise. Make Some Noise is, where I think a lot of our fan base saw Jacob Wysocki for the first time. And what a talent, right? Yeah. And you go, well, how do you not bring him on then to Dirty Laundry and then to Game Changer and then to a lot of our other shows? And so now when we think about a show like Make Some Noise, that's a great place for, especially for improvisers, to come just do your thing and have fun. And the fan base might gravitate towards you and want to see more of you, and we'll hear about it because we have that conversation with our fans. And then a show like Dirty Laundry allows us to have our talent show some of the non-performer side, which very much is in that parasocial wheelhouse and part of the Venn diagram of the types of shows that we have. And so we're very careful, especially with Dirty Laundry. That show, even though it has Dirty Laundry and Make Some Noise have the most number of like cast slots, if you look at it that way. How many people can we cast in a season of a show? Dirty Laundry, 12 episodes in a normal order of a season times 4 people. You have about 48 opportunities to cast people. That's a good number. And we work with so many people that number gets expired pretty quickly. So a lot of times if we're like going back and forth between maybe 2 or 3 people, what will come up is in conversation, like our weekly casting meeting will be, hey, this person is going to be on an episode that we've already taped of Game Changer that's coming out 4 weeks before this episode of Dirty Laundry comes out. It would be great for our audience to see that episode of Game Changer and then see them on an episode of Dirty Laundry. So, to answer your question, it is definitely a factor. It doesn't ever really drive why we would put some, we're not going to put
Mhm.
somebody in just for the sake of putting them on camera. Obviously, there needs to be good reason to be there. But it is absolutely a factor in the strategy of how we cast. And then, like I said, make some noise as a vehicle for like, improvisers. A lot of times, folks on TikTok or Instagram that we see that are really talented that may not know, or our fans may not know yet. Great opportunity to come in. I would say, obviously, Dimension 20 and Game Changer are kind of the other end of the spectrum, right? Because those, Dimension 20 specifically requires a bit of a skill set. Even if you haven't played tabletop yet, which has happened a few times, you have to have at least a desire and want to be able to sit at a table for, when we shoot, those episodes are 4 hours to tape. I mean, you're sitting there for a long time. We do 2 a day usually. So you got to want to play Dungeons and
Yeah.
Dragons or at least another tabletop game for 12 hours a day times however many days we're shooting that season. So that's a very, and then you obviously have camaraderie of the people at the table. There's a lot that goes into that show. And then Game Changer is very game specific. And I would imagine Sam's talked about this. A lot of times we will write a show and write a format of an episode with someone in mind, specifically for that show. And I'm sure you've seen the story now about Bingo, how
Mhm.
Grant was the person that was supposed to be there, tested positive for COVID. Brennan had to fly in. And so sometimes people are, we're able to swap someone out, but it's much, much harder on a show like Game Changer than it would be on like a Make Some Noise, for example. So it really kind of, runs the spectrum, but we do try to pay attention to releases, when people are going to see that person, get exposed to them, what their skill sets is, all skill sets are,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'll say one of the things that I really appreciate, and obviously like understandable, especially coming from like Sam's perspective of like a long COVID sufferer, that your company is still taking COVID seriously.
We are, yeah.
Feels very good as like a
Yeah,
fan when you're like, oh, like when like the like that story came out of like, yeah, Grant tested positive for COVID, so we had to bring in someone else. Like, oh, they're still testing.
they're still
Like,
testing.
it's
Yeah,
like think like because it's I hear so often that like, well, now that the pandemic's over, it's like, well, let's
yeah.
not go that far.
Yeah,
Like,
well, it's like one of these things. I think, kind of on the world stage, we've all realized that COVID isn't going away. It's, I think
right,
now more and more it's going to be treated like the flu, in that it's a very dangerous disease if you're not careful. It's also still very contagious. It's mutating constantly. Like, you have to be mindful of it. Like, just because the whole world isn't shut down doesn't mean that it goes away. And when you're on set, as it's like you're in a relatively small space
mm-hmm.
with sometimes 50, 60, 70 people. And we obviously have air conditioning, air circulation, but it's just not the same thing as being outside or
Right,
6 feet away from someone, or any of kind of the protocols that we were following as the world 2 years ago. So risk is high if you're sick. And frankly, it's COVID aside, if you're sick, don't come to set. We will still pay you, by the way. Like, that's something that's really important to us too. If someone tests positive, we still pay you for the day,
yeah,
because it's not your fault you got sick. And
yeah.
and
Huge win for Grant then.
huge win for Grant.
Doesn't
Huge win for
doesn't have
Grant.
to get
Yeah,
humiliated and gets
yeah,
paid.
and still gets paid. Yeah, but it happens to crew members a lot too. We get crew members that test positive, and it's you don't want them to lose out on a day of work because they tested positive for COVID. It's like such a
Right,
bummer for them. A lot of times they want to be there on set. They're doing the thing that they're really good at, whether it's a camera operator, sound mixer, PA, whatever it is. They're excited to be there, and they're the ones who don't feel well and have to go home. It would be extra worse to then go, sorry, you've lost out on a day of compensation for that, right?
yeah,
So I'm glad you recognize that. It's one of these things that is going to continue to be important to us, and we're doing checks on it. We adjust the protocols kind of based on the season, based on if we hear that there's a surge in positive test cases, we might enforce higher or stricter standards. But we always mask on set. Everyone's in a
yeah.
KN95 on mask, or KN95 mask on set. And then for the bigger shows, we're doing antigen testing every other day for all crew members, including day one. And
Yeah.
then, it's really important to us. It's a company policy at this point.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much. Like this was, I was nervous about this interview because I was like, it's a producer, and like, because producing is so like complex and nebulous in terms of like,
Yeah.
what do you do, like that kind of
I've
thing.
been trying to convince my mom, who I have a wonderful relationship with, what exactly it is I do for the last 15 years, and she still doesn't really know. It's one of
Yeah.
these things where it's like, I don't know, you just, and what I happily tell anybody is my job is to make sure that the entire production from day one to the final day is done well to our standards, on time, on budget, and most importantly, that everyone who worked on it had a really great experience. And if that happens, great. I don't write, I don't shoot, I don't direct, I don't act, I don't perform, I don't do any of those things. So I really don't do much. If you're like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Not much, Jordan. It's really not.
Yeah.
A lot of phone calls, a lot of emails.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife recently said something to me about like, I think I would have enjoyed like like being like responsible for like budget and stuff on like a film, and I was like, a producer, and she's like, is that what they do? And I was like, yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah, we do a lot with money and lawyers, which
yeah,
it's a whole separate passion. But no, this was a real treat, Jordan. I'm so glad that you asked me to be on, and anytime, always happy to chat.
This was amazing. If the folks out there want to find you on Instagram, I know you post periodically. I just discovered you're on TikTok as well, because I was obviously diving into your research and I found your TikTok. There is nothing on there, so no reason to follow you there.
But observer on TikTok for now. I keep thinking that one day I will.
Don't do it. Your life will become like mine.
Honestly, like I don't have genuine or sincere content to post at the moment. Lots of other people do that for us on behalf of Dropout on a personal level. I think the best place, if people want to come find me and follow along, at iPhone Kyle on Instagram, at Kyle Rohrbach on X, formerly Twitter, and every now and then I'll post up there too. It's either going to be Dropout content, wine content, travel content, or occasionally I'm a father of a 15-year-old, and so every now and then it's griping about being a parent. Please feel free to engage. I love when people ask questions and chime in and send me DMs. I'm always happy to chat. So
yeah, you posted. I mean, you were the first person I saw that posted the picture of like the culinary studio, and you went through the process of blacking out the logo, which some other folks who posted pictures sure didn't.
Going, oh, come on, like let's do it.
But when you're the wife of the CEO, you probably don't get in trouble for that kind of thing. Just saying. Anyway, Kyle, this has been fantastic. Well, I'm sorry.
I said I have no comment at this time. It's all good.
Yeah. This has been such a delight. Thank you so much. I don't know how to end interviews, so I'm just going to hit stop recording.
That seems like the right